Okay, let's unpack this. You boot up Borderlands 4, and yeah, we are talking about the upcoming Borderlands 4, and you step into the boots of a brand new Vault Hunter.
Hmm,
These characters are just, well, they're the core of the game, right? They're your eyes, your gun-wielding hands in this incredibly chaotic universe.
absolutely.
But how do the developers actually create these unique, often really wild heroes? Where did they even start?
That's a fantastic question, and it's exactly what we're diving into today. We've managed to pull together insights directly from the developers themselves, giving us a real sort of behind-the-curtain look at their process.
Okay, so straight from the source.
Exactly. They've been sharing how they take a character from, just an idea, maybe a sketch, to someone you can spend dozens, maybe even hundreds of hours playing as.
Right. So our mission here is to really extract the core ideas behind designing a character built not just to survive the mayhem of Borderlands, but to absolutely thrive in it.
Yeah, to embrace it.
From that initial spark all the way to the final polished character in the game, what's the essential knowledge you need about how these agents of chaos get made?
And well, to even begin, we have to understand the fundamental identity. Like, what is a Vault Hunter really at their heart?
Yeah.
The developers have a really specific definition for this, and it's definitely more than just player character.
Okay, so what is I remember they described them as treasure hunters, bounty seekers.
Mm-hmm. That's part of it.
They definitely live life right on the edge, operating with a certain, well, a certain self-interest, let's say.
Precisely. They're perfectly fine taking matters into their own hands.
Yeah.
They operate firmly in that gray space, not necessarily tied to typical laws or morals if it gets them what they want.
Because ultimately their motivation is pretty straightforward, isn't it? They're after the riches, the power, the glory.
Right.
You name it. If it's valuable in the Borderlands, they probably want it.
And they're willing to do what it takes to get it. That's key.
Mm.
But here's the crucial twist. The thing that really defines a Vault Hunter compared to just any old mercenary or bandit out there,
Mm.
they don't just endure the utter chaos of Borderlands.
No, they kind of lean into it.
They embrace it. They thrive in it. That's like the baseline.
Right.
If you can't find this perverse joy in all that anarchy, you're probably not Vault Hunter material.
Okay, so they're basically greedy, chaotic survivors who are also really, really good at exploiting the madness around them. Got it.
That sums it up pretty well.
But where does that idea for specific character even come from? You mentioned getting insights from the devs. This is where the Genesis story gets pretty surprising, right?
It really does. It kind of flips the script on what you might expect. You maybe imagine like a top-down mandate from leadership saying, okay, for Borderlands 4, we need, this type, that.
Yeah, checklist.
Right. But according to the developers, that initial spark often comes from internal pitches from within the company.
And get this, the sources say anyone in the company can pitch a Vault Hunter idea. Anyone.
Yeah. Like the person who handles the build servers or a narrative writer, maybe even someone from accounting if they've got a killer concept. It's pretty open.
That's wild.
It often originates from the developers themselves, just playing the game. They're in that world, experiencing the gameplay loops, and they start thinking.
You know, it would be cool.
Exactly. I wish I could do this. Or what kind of player fantasy are we missing here? And they turn those thoughts into actual pitches.
That's fascinating because it grounds the initial ideas in actual gameplay experience and personal desires from the people building the game itself.
Totally. So they collect all these pitches. What happens then? Do they just pick one?
Well, that's the next step. They collect them, review them, discuss them, narrow them down. But sometimes they find that the best path isn't just picking one single idea.
Oh, interesting. So they combine them, like maybe taking a core mechanic from one pitch and the visual concept from another.
Precisely. They might take elements from multiple different pitches and kind of fuse them together to make something they feel is even more badass than the individual parts.
Okay. A creative melting pot sort of thing.
Exactly. You get diverse ideas from all over the company, and then you cherry pick the most exciting bits to create something genuinely unique.
That makes a lot of sense. So once they have that core idea, that fused concept, how does it start taking actual shape?
That's when it moves properly into the design phase. And the core goal here, they said, is to create somebody that players, and this is crucial, the developers themselves too can really relate to.
Relate to? How do you relate to someone who, like, summons killer robots or turns invisible?
Well, maybe not literally relate, but relatable in the way you relate to a character you admire in fiction. They mentioned viewing it similarly to designing a hero for, say, a comic book.
Okay. Like an archetype you connect with.
Yeah, you want something that feels familiar enough to connect with, somebody you genuinely think, yeah, I'd actually want to be that person if I were dropped into the Borderlands universe.
So it's less about perfect realism and more about, like, aspirational fantasy grounded in a familiar archetype.
You got it. It begins with this core ideation phase where they're really defining and deciphering what kind of fantasies we want to build for players.
Hmm. What kind of unique power trips, what roles, playstyles, or maybe chaotic niches do players want to step into in this world?
And that ideation feeds directly into the actual creation pipeline.
Right, so it flows from that initial brainstorming and concept generation into things like concept art, actually visualizing the character, their gear.
Then the design team reacts to those visuals, refining the kit, the abilities, and from there you move on to actually building the character in the game engine, getting the basic model and mechanics working.
Okay.
And then there's that signature piece.
The action skill,
Yeah.
their main unique ability that really defines a big part of their playstyle. Building that out is obviously critical.
Okay, so you have this pipeline. Idea, concept, design, build, action, skill. Sounds logical, pretty step by step.
It does, doesn't it?
But here's where it gets really interesting, because according to the developers, it is not a purely linear process. Not at all.
Ah, okay. How so?
They describe it as a continuous process. They're constantly working in parallel across different disciplines: animation, VFX, audio design, core mechanics.
Right, all at the same time feeding into each other.
Exactly. And they're always asking that fundamental question. Does it feel good? Does it feel fun?
Because sometimes, on paper, an idea sounds amazing, right?
Yeah.
But when you actually put it into the game,
It just doesn't click.
yeah, it doesn't feel right. The animation might not quite convey the power, or the sound effect is maybe a bit weak, or the mechanic itself feels clunky to use.
And when that happens, they don't just force it through. The developers are very clear. If it doesn't feel good, you go back and you have to redo stuff.
So it's this constant loop: create, test, get feedback, iterate.
Yeah, constantly.
Yeah.
So these Vault Hunters are essentially in constant production throughout the whole development cycle. They just keep tweaking animations, timing, damage numbers, cooldowns, everything.
Until, as they put it rather humorously,
Yeah.
code tells us, stop touching stuff. We got to ship.
Haha, right. Must be hard to let go.
It really underscores how much refinement goes into something that looks so effortless and fun when you finally play it. It's the result of just relentless iteration based purely on feel.
And this entire process, this constant drive to make it feel good, seems to be underpinned by a core philosophy for the entire Borderlands universe, doesn't it?
Absolutely. According to the developers, the guiding principle for Borderlands, for like everything they put in it,
Let me guess.
is just to be badass.
Knew it. Yeah, that tracks. That applies to the weapons, the enemy designs, the environment.
And especially the Vault Hunters and their abilities. Everything has to meet that core expectation of being incredibly cool and impactful. It's what the community expects, they said.
Right.
They mentioned that characters can truly come from any walk of life. They could bring anything to the table in terms of background or initial concept. But at the end of the day, two things are absolutely non-negotiable. They have to be cool and they have to be fun to play. That's the Borderlands test, basically.
And their approach to ensuring that badass feeling is achieved, even in the most extreme situations, it's quite telling how they think about it.
Yeah, they design by imagining each character at the most heightened and the most insane scenario imaginable within the Borderlands universe.
Okay, break that down. What does that mean in practice?
Well, think about it.
Mm.
The average day on Pandora, or wherever Borderlands 4 takes place, would be an utterly insane, probably lethal scenario for you or me, right?
Oh, for sure, dead in minutes.
So, if that's the baseline, the normal Tuesday, they have to ask, what would a truly crazy day look like for someone who actually lives in that universe?
Ah, okay. Like, crank the insanity dial way past 11.
Exactly. How would they handle it? What abilities would they need to not just survive that kind of hyper-insanity, but to dominate it, to look cool doing it?
So they're not just thinking about, okay, how does this character handle 3 bandits in a corridor?
Yep.
They're thinking, what if this character is completely surrounded by a horde of, like, super mutated psychos? They're dodging incoming rockets from some huge badass loader while simultaneously trying to shut down a ticking time bomb.
Exactly. They push the concept to its absolute extreme. And the logic is, if the character feels capable, powerful, and yes, badass in that scenario,
Then they'll feel amazing and everything less intense the game throws at you.
precisely. It ensures the power fantasy holds up even when the chaos levels are completely maxed out.
And while they stick to that core philosophy of badassery, they're also always pushing for novelty, right? They don't want to just give you the same character archetypes with a new coat of paint each time.
Definitely not. They acknowledge their archetypes they almost always have. Staples like the soldier or the siren. Fans love them for a reason.
Right, they're familiar anchors.
But the critical piece is they constantly ask, what if? They take those familiar roles and they deliberately twist them.
You mentioned some examples from the source material.
Yeah, like asking, okay, what if the siren, instead of, say, elemental powers or phase shifting, had spooky, dark, almost necromantic powers? That's a totally different vibe.
Ooh, interesting. Yeah.
Or what if our soldier character had this cybernetic suit practically grafted onto his body, giving him extra arms, extra ligaments to help him in battle in a really unique mechanical way?
Those specific examples really illustrate how they explore new gameplay mechanics and character concepts, rooted in the familiar Borderlands world, but really pushing the boundaries of what those roles can be.
It's all about creating new and interesting experiences within that known framework. Keep it fresh.
And all of this intricate design, this iteration, this what-if thinking, it would all be kind of moot if the players didn't actually connect with the characters in the end.
Oh, totally. The developers stated very clearly that delivering Vault Hunters that players will really love is everything to the team. That's the ultimate goal.
Which is why playtesting isn't just like a late-stage checkbox for them. They described it as a key pillar of the whole development process.
They make sure they are playtesting often, bringing in actual players, different types, different skill levels throughout the different individual phases of development, not just at the end.
So getting the core systems, the early design ideas, even just the feel of the action skills in front of players early on.
Super crucial. They want to see if they're on base, if players are reacting the way they hoped, or if they need to go and be a little bit better.
It's that direct feedback loop informing the continuous iteration we talked about.
Exactly. And they're not just listening passively when the game's out either. They're actively looking at the community, listening to feedback, watching how people play the previous games, reading comments.
Why? Just to give people exactly what they ask for?
Not quite.
Yeah.
It's to make sure that we're kind of meeting their expectations and then exceeding them. But there's a twist there, too.
Oh.
They also want to surprise the players. They infer a lot of what they're feeling from the community buzz and past game data, and they use that insight to actively play with those expectations.
Okay. So they see what the community thinks they want or expects based on past games or archetypes.
Right.
And then they build something that hits similar notes, maybe satisfies that core desire, but does it with unexpected twists.
You got it. So by the time the game actually comes out, even with all the trailers and the marketing hype,
You're still surprised by some specifics, like the nuances of the abilities or how a character really plays.
exactly, it's that delightful feeling of, oh, I thought it did this, but it actually does that, which is even cooler. Keeps things exciting.
It sounds like a careful dance, then. Between delivering on known player desires and introducing genuinely novel, surprising mechanics, all rooted in that badass philosophy.
That seems to be the tightrope they walk.
And speaking of the game coming out, the developers sounded, well, incredibly excited for players to finally get their hands on Borderlands 4.
Yeah, you can definitely sense the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
They want people to truly experience how badass this world really is with these new characters they've poured so much into.
They teased some key aspects too, didn't they? Something about scale.
They said it's not only bigger, and specifically by a large extent than previous games,
Well, okay.
but also far more detailed and far more beautiful. Sounds like a significant leap.
The message seems pretty clear. We're back, and we're bigger and better than ever.
Pretty much sums it up.
Okay.
They highlighted having so much more abilities, so much more that goes into our Vault Hunters, implying more depth, more systems maybe.
And of course.
And of course, that staple promise of billions of guns. Wouldn't be Borderlands without it.
Never change, Borderlands. Never change.
That combination, though a massively expanded world, increased character depth, and that really meticulous, iterative, player-focused design process for the Vault Hunters. It seems to have them genuinely confident.
Yeah, they sound like they believe people will be really, really excited about what Borderlands 4 is bringing to the table.
Based on how they describe the process, you can see why.
It definitely sounds like a huge amount of creative energy, technical skill, and just genuine love for making fun, chaotic gameplay goes into crafting these characters. They aren't just models with ability slapped on.
No, they're really the embodiment of that badass philosophy, constantly refined through iteration and player feedback.
It's a fascinating blend, isn't it? Internal creative passion meeting external community input, all shaping that core player
It
experience.
really is.
Right. And it leaves us with maybe a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider. We learned that the developers designed these Vault Hunters by imagining them in the absolute most heightened and most insane scenarios Borderlands can possibly offer.
hmm Designing for the extreme.
So how does this philosophy, designing for the extreme edge case, the absolute peak chaos, rather than just the average encounter, how does that influence the kind of truly wild, unique, and memorable abilities and character concepts we end up seeing?
That's a great question.
Not just in Borderlands, maybe, but potentially in other games that try to push boundaries. Is designing for the worst case, most insane scenario actually the key to unlocking the most creative, most badass potential?
Hmm. Something to definitely mull over next time you're, facing down a badass psycho while dodging a hail of bullets and corrosive goo. Does that extreme design philosophy make the moment better?
Exactly. Food for thought.